What's up, guys? Scottoria here to talk about a build that I'm incredibly excited about. Not only being viable, but being absolutely busted. You can absolutely delete every single in-game boss except for Uber Etziri because the whole like reflect thing. But 100% delirious maps, all of the invitations easily. Uber Elder with Maven watching, you name it, you can destroy all of it. It's so much fun. I've been trying to make this build work for the last 2 leagues just to make it to where it's at right now. And we've finally done it. So with that, special shout out to Gryph, who gave me the inspiration for this build, in particularly the concept of self-burn. It's a concept I hadn't taken into account before, but he paved the way with the idea of self-burning to really make this type of build pop. So I'll have the link to his forum as well as his Twitch down below. Special shout out there, man. Appreciate it, dude. Now, if you haven't already, please hit that like and subscribe button down below. I'm on social media at Kevin Raisins, also live stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/Scottoria. And something I do want to point out before I get like blown up in the comments about it, during that opening clip when I walk up to the Legion and then the little bomb drops and then like I actually clear the Legion. As a heads up, that the Legion I'm actually clearing is the second Legion on that map. It just gave so much more lag, and it really gave me what I was looking for that type of like content I wanted to, I guess, push for you guys. So as a heads up, same map, just a different Legion. I wanted to clarify that. Now, me and the boys are usually in Discord pretty much every night. So you guys are always welcome to hop in there and hang out with us, play PoE, ask any kind of questions. And also, if you have any kind of questions about the build or would like some kind of input you would like to contribute toward it, please feel free to leave a comment down below. I truly appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to check out my video. Let's get started. We're going to start off by talking about the build concept, how it works, and the synergy between the Burning Witch and our DPS output. Then we're going to talk about the path of building, the configuration for it, as well as the tree itself. Then we're going to talk about the Ascendancy and the Bandits we take, followed by the gear, jewels, and flasks we use, as well as go a little bit more into how we go about crafting the rare items on our build. Then we talk about the gems we take, as well as the alt quality gems. Then finally, we talk about the map modifiers that we cannot run. So let's start off with the basic concept of this build, how it works, why it works, and the reason why we choose things like cast on crit as well as cast when damage taken. Now, one of the best parts about this build is that you're not really button mashing and clicking a bunch of different things in order to really juice out your DPS. You're literally only hotkeying your Flame Dash. I guess you can't really see it right behind me, but your Flame Dash and your Cyclone. Those are literally the only 2 buttons outside of your flasks that you're having to push. And this is because a special interesting mechanic between Eye of Innocence and essentially lighting yourself on fire. Because as you're dealing damage, you take 100 fire damage when you ignite an enemy. Now, that's further mitigated by our fire resistance, being that we should be capped at 76 at the moment. So after a bunch of math and all that stuff, you're actually only taking up to about 20. However, that does actually stack up really fast, especially if you're going into a really dense pack. That's why we're taking things like the Watcher's Eye, that's giving us energy shield on hit, etc., etc. And it also comes with an inherent fire damage leeches life while ignited, which is pretty spicy, as well as some more recovery, etc. on the tree that we're going to go over during the path of building section. Now, what's important about this is not only are we getting more 70% increased fire damage, or excuse me, just damage overall while ignited, but we're also able to proc all of our CWDT pretty constantly. So this is our 6-link setup. We're putting it in our staff, however you can put it in your chest piece. Really doesn't matter what it's put at. And it's at level 1. We're actually linking Combustion, which procs really nicely with our Wave of Conviction and Divergent Purity of Flame. Now, the reason why we're using these is Divergent Purity of Flame increases the damage taken from nearby enemies that you're actually attacking. Wave of Conviction, obviously applying essentially heat exposure. It applies -25 to elemental resistance, matching the highest damage taken, which is obviously fire. And then we're also doing Blade Blast, which is actually a really interesting synergy we're going with. Blade Blast, essentially, it's unnerving the enemy, which actually increases spell damage taken, as well as synergizes really nicely with our Belt enchant. Hits against enemies unnerved by you have 50% increased spell crit chance. Now, since we're also unnerving, it's going to proc a couple other things we're going to get into a little bit more in the configuration, but just kind of keep that in mind. And of course, our level 3 Immortal Call. So we're able to proc all of this pretty consistently while you're constantly attacking because we're dealing damage to ourselves. We also have another setup at max level 21 is what we're pushing for. I just picked up a level 20 for now. And that's going to be linked to our Assassin's Mark, Bone Offering, and Anomalous Summon Ice Golem. We're going to get into that a little bit later in the video. But ultimately, that's the concept behind the build. It's dealing large amounts of DPS while not having to push really any buttons at all. And then and then kind of leveraging all those like self-damage mechanics and then pushing forward. So without further ado, let's hop straight into the path of building itself. So our current tree, we're taking one large cluster, one medium, and we're actually going with the Megalomatic and then the Fettle little small cluster jewel. The configuration setup for it, let's kind of go over that so we can kind of understand where our DPS is coming from. Overall, our total deeps is actually Shaper 2.7 million, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, 2.7 million per ball. And bear in mind, each cast, as long as you have Awakened Spell Cascade and the Helmet Enchantment, which we'll go over once we get to our gear section, we're actually casting 20 balls at a time. So with a max of 60 all at once, like once you have like all the balls like flying around everywhere, you can have a max total of 60. GGG saw a lot of server issues when people were really leveraging a lot of these mechanics, and people were just having ridiculous amount of volatile dead balls everywhere. So the cap's at 60. Which is really, really easy to ramp up to, and that's 2.7 million per ball, which is just, if you do the math on that, it's just absolutely nuts. That's why we're able to just one-shot pretty much all of the in-game content. So like I said, let's go over these. Are you always on full life, full energy shield? Being that we are taking a lot of damage, we're also sustaining, regaining it from ES and then life on hit, as well as leech mechanics and stuff like that. So we can go ahead and check those. Power and frenzy charges are actually being generated from the tree itself. We're getting power charges from two separate sources, from Whirling Barrier, where we're getting % power charge on block, and then same with Mage Hunter. With Frenzy, it is from our Anointment, which we're actually getting frenzy charges and endurance charges over in offense or charging offensive. Channeling skills deal increased damage. None of that really matters, but the more important part is 10% chance to gain an endurance and frenzy charge when hit while channeling. So that's how we're able to kind of check those blocks. And then once we go into Fortify, that's going to be from our tree. We are getting it from our Megalomatic. That's why I would say Overlord is probably the most important node. We also want Mystical Ward because we're getting Spell Leech as well as block spell damage. And then Dark Disclosures kind of giving us more of that energy shield regen, and then juicing out our curses a little bit more. And then Tailwind from our boots and Elusive, that's pretty obvious. Yes, we're going to be, spamming our flasks, especially when you're doing more maps and stuff like that. Boss fights shouldn't last very long at all. So essentially pop your flasks and they'll pretty much be deleted anyway. So we're going to assume they're in Consecrated Ground, since we do use Bottled Faith, and then as well as our Purifying Flame Totems. Are you ignited? Yeah, we're always dealing damage, so we're always igniting ourselves. We've crit recently, non-crit. These are pretty obvious. Have you cast a spell recently? Sure. Summon corpses. That's what we're constantly doing with Desecrate. Crit chances lucky from our Diamond Flask. Enemies always ignited. And being that we're constantly casting Desecrate, there's always corpses nearby. And from our Ascendancy, we're actually always chilling and shocking the enemy. We talked about the Unnerved mechanic we're getting from Blade Blast, that we're constantly casting from our CWDT, so Unnerved is there. Enemies covered in ash based off of our Wrapped in Flame. Being that we're always burning, we always have a 5% chance to cover enemies in ash while you're burning. So, and we also attack a bunch, so it's a fairly easy one to check. And of course, once again, enemies on Consecrated Ground, just Shaper. Like I said, that's absolutely ridiculous. Let's say we had max balls out. 60 times 2.7 million is, yeah, that would be the reason. So let's go straight into our Ascendancy and why we chose Necromancer. Essentially, Necromancer with any kind of build that utilizes Desecrate or Corpse Consumption generally kind of leans a little bit more toward Necromancer, because you're taking things like Plaguebringer, whereas where it says if you've consumed a corpse recently, you and your minions have 30% increased AoE. I mean, it's kind of cool, but more importantly, with at least one nearby corpse, you and allies deal 10% more damage. And then enemies deal 10% less damage, which is huge. Those keywords being more and reduced are actually multipliers. They're not increased scalings based off of like flat rates. Corpse pack, we're getting a little bit of attack speed. Cast speed doesn't mean anything to us. However, nearby corpses that you spawned, enemies nearby corpses that you spawned are chilled and shocked. So that's like a free skitterbots right there. That's 35% mana that we don't have to worry about at all. As well as corpses you spawn at 50% increased life. Now, one of the aspects behind Volatile Dead that's not being taken into account in the path of building here within this 2.7 million reading is the actual corpse explosion itself. I guess we should probably be able to see it here. So right now we're getting about an additional 705,000 Shaper from the corpse explosion. And the corpse explosion is based off of the minion life. So it's very important to kind of scale that up. Or I wouldn't allocate too many resources, but this is one of those additional like free chicken essentially. And then of course, Mistress of Sacrifice, being that we do have Bone Offering linked to our CWDT setup. Those offering skills will help further our block chance, as well as some of our regen and survivability, etc. And then one of the big things about Commander of Darkness is we're actually getting that 30% elemental resistance, which frees up a lot of space in our gear, which we're going to go over here in a second, and actually gives us a lot of DPS. And of course, more attack speed. When it comes to cast on crit mechanic, we're generally pushing for that just underneath 15.14 APS, especially since we're using Awaken cast on crit. We're not going to get too much in the details as the mechanics and attack rates of like where our optimal place is. Generally speaking, rule of thumb, you want to be over 12.12 and then underneath 15.14. So being that we are, let's check, Cyclone 14.89, we're right there in that wiggle, that little sweet spot. So that's most effective for us. Now, let's go straight into the gear and the bandits. So bandits, we actually just killed all, got the extra 2 points. That way we can kind of fill out the tree. The gear itself, replica Dust Dawn. This gives us a nice amount of APS, especially from a staff, as well as block chance. And then our crit. However, the most important aspects of it are going to be the elemental damage as extra chaos, our crit multi, and our elemental damage if you've dealt a crit recently. Well, I guess crit multis, there's only one roll on it. So I would say elemental damage, and elemental damage is extra chaos damage. So if you do get one of these, this thing's about 20 exalt. So as a heads up, this is not just a willy-nilly get whatever staff. You get the one you can get. You add the enchantment. Quality doesn't increase fizz damage. It instead increase elemental damage per 2% quality. Get yourself a Hillock Craft at 28%. And then you could juice out with a corruption from the bestiary and get up to 30. However, that's once you're done divining it, once you've done linked it, and it's all set and ready to go. But like I said, chaos and then elemental damage are your optimal rolls. Bone Helmet, this one was a little bit more on the spicy side to craft. We did have to Maven Orb 3 different things, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, because we go crit multi. However, the most important 2 things that you want to Maven Orb are going to be your fire damage to spells, and then the elemental damage, which is going to additionally give you damage penetrates 3% enemy elemental resistance. If you want to get spicy with it, like I said, you can Awakener Orb, Maven Orb, the global crit strike multiplier. However, I believe that's like a 3% difference, so it's more up to you on that one. I wouldn't really recommend, just dropping 8.5 exalt. However, by all means, everything on this list is actually weirdly easy to craft. It's extremely expensive. However, there's not a whole lot of gambling involved in the sense that you have a pretty set plan on how you can obtain this through various different crafting methods. Such as the Astral Plate. We actually Maven Orb for effective offerings, and then we Maven Orb the elemental resistance to get the +1 to max. And then we Awakener Orb those 2, and then we're able to just Aug Crit or Aug Caster. I don't remember what the tags are, but it's pretty self-explanatory to easily harvest pretty much all of those mods. Val Gauntlets are actually an incursion base that we hit with a Redeemer Orb. And then we just kind of fill out, as you can see here, we have a crit roll, chaos, lightning, life. It's very self-explanatory, super easy. Two-tone boots were a little bit spicier. I actually ended up running the labs myself to get the enchantment. But we were able to get it. And then we were able to land Tailwind, which you can Maven Orb, and then we Woke Orbed into a the Elusive. However, if you're trying to like really get these boots, what I would recommend is actually getting a base that already has Tailwind and tier 1 strength, because if you don't get the tier 1 strength roll on your boots, then you're actually going to end up having to take the might or physique rolls, which are a little bit of a pain, but to each his own. If you're able to get that tier 1 strength on your boots, and then as well as Tailwind and all this, everything else on the boots is easy, but the strength and Tailwind are the biggest issues. So like I said, I would recommend just buying it that way, or you can spam with essences until you hit Tailwind. Not what I would recommend at all, but it's an option. I have Innocence, obviously, super easy. I think I paid maybe 10 chaos for a perfectly rolled one, or maybe 20 chaos. Super cheap. Allocates charging offensive. That's, like I said, that's how we're getting our frenzy and endurance charges. This opal ring was a little bit spicier. What I ended up doing in order to craft this was I Awakener Orbed, the chance to ignite fire damage against ignited enemies alongside endurance charge, fire damage per endurance charge. Awakener Orb, those two. And then I believe you can just aug caster, and that's the only caster mod on there, was the fire damage to spells and attacks. And then you just reforge keeping prefixes until you're able to hit accuracy, tier 1 accuracy. Now, the issue with accuracy is probably going to be the hardest roll, because there's like 22 different attack suffixes. Luckily, add remove attack is fairly cheap right now in TFT, which I'll have the link down below to that. However, I ended up hitting tier 2 and was like okay with it, and then put an accuracy roll as an implicit on my Circle of Anguish. However, if you hit tier 1 accuracy, then you don't have to worry about putting accuracy on anything else. You should be able to get your 100% hit chance with your Cyclone. Like I said, everything else is easy from that point. Stygian Vise, once again, super craftable. I would recommend Woke Orbing the two, rolling your tier 1 life, and then remove non-life, add life till you hit the percent tier 1 life, and then just fill out the rest. Everything else is super easy. When it comes to jewels, the key points we're going to be looking at is Thread of Hope within a large radius, so that way we can hit those mods on our tree. Some other points are going to be Megalomatic. Now, another jewel just like this one doesn't exist on the market from my understanding. I would say Overlords. The Overlord is the most important one. If you can happen to find one with Mystical Ward also, that's some added bonus. However, Overlord's your important one. Outside of that, go with something more deep, either DPS or even more like Energy Shield Recharge or Energy Shield Leech or something like that, survivability, or even spell or attack block. Glorious Vanity, I've actually seen like 4 different ones on the market that have exactly this roll. 6289, the name of Doriani. This one's a really nice one because we're able to get an effective non-curse, we're able to get max energy shield, we're able to get spell block, curse effect, skill effect duration, evasion rating, and fire damage. So that one's really juicy, and that's going to give us our corrupted soul, which is the important part. Gaining 20% of max life is extra max energy shield. So we're all significantly well onto the hybrid side of it when it comes to defenses and sustainability. Our Watcher's Eye, the optimal one, is going to be the energy shield gain for each enemy hit while affected by discipline. That's going to help with our survivability, and since we're constantly being ignited, that's going to help us kind of sustain without essentially killing ourselves. Honestly, I would say the crit multi while affected by anger is the superior one. If you can't afford all 3 of these mods, I would lean more toward the crit multi and the discipline. Fire damage as well as discipline. As long as discipline's on there, pick one of the other 2 that you can afford. Otherwise, all 3 of these are the most optimal. Reckless Defense with the implicit Corrupted Blood. It's a little bit on the expensive side, but not terrible. I think I paid about 5 Exalt for this one. This is obviously just going to give us, spell block, attack block, and then chance to be frozen, shock, and ignited. That's more for us dealing. And yeah, that about covers the jewels. Oh, of course, medium cluster is going to be wrapped in flame. We kind of covered that a little bit, where we can cover enemies in ash, as well as consume corpses, or ignited enemies you destroy their corpses are consumed. So basically those pesky porcupines, stuff like that, it won't be a bother. And with our large cluster jewel, we're actually taking Conjured Wall, which is, once again, more spell block. So we should be pushing close to max block. We have max attack block and 72% spell block. Mage Hunters, same, getting spell damage. It's also given us the opportunity to get more power charges, which is going to then fuel our cast on crit. And then Essence Rush has given us that spell leech, that spell damage leech, etc., which is super, super nice. Now going into our flasks, Bottle of Faith is surprisingly cheap right now. I think I paid just shy of 3 Exalt for mine. Cinder Swallow is actually the expensive one, which is kind of weird. I think maybe not many people are running the Mastermind right now, which is why. But you want Cinder Swallow with the crit chance as the crafted modifier, and then we're just going with Quicksilver, Basalt, with some movement speed, Diamond Flask, obviously, so that we continue to crit and sustain. And then, of course, like I said, the small cluster jewel Fettle. So going into our gems, we did kind of briefly talk about our gem setup with our CWDT, so we're not going to really, double down on that. You guys get the picture of it. However, let's talk a little bit about our actual links for our main skill, which is Cyclone, Divergent Cyclone, which is going to give us a little bit more movement speed. Desecrate. Now, the reason why we actually go the Phantasmal route is because it spawns a Forgotten Corpse, which is those really thick, juicy harvest beasts. And like I said before, the more life that a corpse has that's being consumed and exploded, the more damage that comes out of it. So getting those really high HP monsters, which come from Phantasmal, are actually helping us put out more damage. Awaken Cast on Crit's going to give us that more cooldown recovery space so we can push the 14.89 APS. Awoke Spell Cascade is going to help us generate more balls. That's how we're able to reach that 20 volatile dead ball mark. And Hypothermia is going to kind of play off that chill we're getting from our corpses. Our auras are going to be Discipline, Anger, Herald of Ash, as well as Vitality, and then Precision, Anomalous. Now, this one's going to be pretty expensive. If I remember correctly, I think I paid about 18 Exalt for it. However, the reason why it's Anomalous is because we're already using a lot of auras, and this is a 10% additional reduced mana reservation from this Precision at level 20. So that's going to really be able to let you squeeze that in there without having to invest too much into mana. Flame Dash with a level 6 Arcane Surge. And then we're able to get Assassin's Mark on our CWDT setup at level 21. And obviously Flammability from the ring we crafted. It pairs well with the Astral Plate we have, since we're able to apply that additional curse and make it super, super nice. Now, map modifiers that we're not able to run. The only ones that I've really struggled with are the obvious ones. We can't run Elemental Reflect. I don't enjoy doing temp chains and all that stuff. However, we're more than able to. Whenever it comes to no leech maps, we can do them. However, they're a little bit spooky. But like I said, the only ones we can't do are pretty much just Elemental Reflect. Fizz Reflect isn't really that bad, since we're not actually doing any real damage with Cyclone. You're not really going to kill yourself. And when it comes to bosses, the only boss we can't do is Uber Ethereus, because of that clone that deals Elemental Reflect, or Elemental and Fizz Reflect. And we have no control over to where our balls go. They just go all over the place. So they happen to seek out that one. You'll just one-shot yourself a bunch of times. So whenever you're ready to do like the Feared, the Maven Invitation, which you can easily do with this build, you're going to have to hop over to a different character that can actually do Uber Ethereus to capture her soul, and then kind of return and do that. All right, so that's pretty much sums it up. If you guys have any kind of questions at all about this build, how it works, maybe there's something I didn't cover or may have forgotten to cover, because that's a lot of information, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to check out my video. See you guys again next time.